Hi everyone, a true next-gen version of Wind Waker HD coming to the Nintendo Switch, or even a new generation of consoles. Would you be excited? With all of its cut content, dungeons, bosses, weapons, and more added back into the game, improved graphics, frame rate, and more. If an updated version does come, which changes or improvements would you like to see? Everyone seems to want Twilight Princess HD, Wind Waker HD, Ocarina of Time HD, the Oracle games, and basically every other classic Zelda game to be brought to Switch, or even a new Nintendo console. I recently made a video listing 10 changes I would love to see made for Twilight Princess HD, if updated for a new console, using ideas and concepts mentioned by Nintendo during interviews and fan suggestions that came from you all. A lot of you have asked to see a similar video on Wind Waker HD, so here are a few of the most popular changes mentioned by all of you and a few of my own. Once again, using interviews and more from Nintendo to decide what might or might not be possible. 1. Let's begin with an easy one, improving the graphics. The biggest difference between Twilight Princess HD's remake and Wind Waker HD's remake is that Nintendo used an early version of the Zelda Wii U or Breath of the Wild's engine, while Tantalus was limited by Nintendo to use the same original engine as the GameCube, and despite them creating better models and wanting to make it look as great as possible, they were only allowed to essentially remake textures, lighting, and other minor differences. That is why Nintendo's example of this, which is what they said Twilight Princess HD could look like if remade, yet we ended up getting this when they actually did remake it. The complicated thing here is, while adding more detail to a game with a more realistic style like Twilight Princess will usually improve the look, Wind Waker's cartoon art style is specifically designed to be cel-shaded and not very detailed. Or you begin changing the art style as a whole and making it look more like a mix of it and Skyward Sword. So this is a bit tricky. How do you improve the graphics of a game that is designed like this? How would you do it? Personally, I think taking inspiration from games like Ni no Kuni would be a great idea. From there, you can improve the draw distance, so we can see islands, items, enemies, and other objects as far as the Great Sea would allow us to, instead of getting pop-in as we get closer and seeing things visibly just blink into existence as we sail. If made for Nintendo's new console, maybe a potential 4K remake would be amazing. But if it is for the Switch, it can keep the 1080p and implement a better anti-aliasing. Again, with Wind Waker, it seems a bit tricky on how to improve the cartoon art style. How would you do it? 2. Replace Miiverse bottles with Switch Online bottles and add weapons. Similar to the stamps in Twilight Princess HD, Wind Waker HD implements a fun way to communicate with friends or players on Miiverse by simply throwing a bottle out in the sea in almost any location. I think this is a fantastic idea, but sadly Miiverse is gone, so unless it is brought back, the change I would like to see would be to just allow the bottles to go out to anyone on your friends list, but also let them contain certain items, whether it be arrows, bombs, collectibles, or even items used in the trading sequences. 3. 60 frames per second. This one is very simple. I personally believe all of the earlier improvements can be made and the game still be allowed to run at a full 60 frames per second with the simple power of the Switch in 1080p, or even 720p at 60 in handheld, giving it a much smoother experience. 4. Add in cut islands, bosses, weapons, dungeons. Basically all of the good cut content. Wind Waker had a lot of great ideas that were cut from the game. Dungeons, bosses, islands, villages, quests, items, weapons, almost everything. Aonuma stated a lot of it, although finished and already in the game, was removed because he felt it slowed the game down, which is how we end up with this awkward Great Fish Isle, the ice and fire volcano islands, and a lot of other stuff that was shortened and left in the game or completely removed. Oddly enough, during the remake of Wind Waker for Wii U, he stated slowing down the game was the reason he changed the Triforce quest. So I always thought it was odd that they felt an already complete dungeon needed to be removed for slowing down the gameplay, but they felt the Triforce quest didn't. What type of dungeon would you have liked to have seen included in Wind Waker that isn't already there? And what location would you place it as? 5. Have all of Hyrule connected. No cutscene or transitions to enter islands. This is similar to the Twilight Princess video. Just like Breath of the Wild has all of Hyrule as one seamless open world with no loading when entering a town, village, forest, or anything, it would be nice to simply sail to an island, get off the boat, and explore it instead of always cutting to a scene or fading to black. Wind Waker does already do this for the smaller islands, but the entire Great Sea would be amazing if seamless. 6. Orchestrated soundtrack. Wind Waker has one of my favorite soundtracks of all time. Hearing the classic songs in the game re-recorded by a live orchestra would be a great improvement. However, give us the option to switch between the classic and new soundtrack while playing, for those who just love the original. 7. Master Quest style second quest with remixed dungeons. After beating the Wind Waker, you can play a second quest in Link's pajamas, and depending on your first playthrough, a bit more details can be uncovered in the game. However, the overall game isn't that much different. This is where Ocarina of Time and even the very first original Legend of Zelda game had the perfect solution with a true second quest and Master Quest. If Nintendo, Tantalus, or whoever brings the game to a new console is allowed to do this, it would easily make a lot of fans who may not be interested because they already have it for Wii go out of their way to purchase and play it again, just for all of the remixed dungeons. And as Wind Waker doesn't have quite as many dungeons as most Zelda games, especially Twilight Princess, remixing fewer dungeons using the assets already in the game, and maybe a few new ones, wouldn't really be that hard of a task, considering all of Wind Waker originally was created from scrap on a new console, the GameCube, in just about 2 or 2.5 years. 8. Have an even faster cell. The original Wind Waker was meant to have multiple cells, but they were cut and we were left with just one. Wind Waker HD added a second, faster cell to make getting from island to island even faster, but a lot of people feel the faster cell is still somewhat slow when having to sail the great distances between islands. A straight line doing nothing but watching the screen can kind of get boring. Adding a third and even faster cell wouldn't ruin the game in any way, would be completely optional, and allow fans to get to the fun parts of the game even faster, especially if playing on the Switch, where the game can be taken on the go. You wouldn't want to spend the 5 or 10 minutes you have free doing nothing but trying to go in a straight line from one island to another. You would want to be solving puzzles and progressing the game. 9. Boss Rush mode. Very similar to the Twilight Princess idea for Boss Rush or a Dungeon Rush mode. Allow us to replay dungeons and bosses and compete with friends and others online with a scoreboard that keeps track of how well you completed the dungeon, how many hearts you lost, how many attacks you missed or blocked from the enemy, how many arrows or other items you used, how fast you complete the dungeon, and more. This would be great for speedrunners or competitive friends. 10. Post-game content. This is simple. The overworld really feels empty. Nintendo could add in islands with new quests, overworld bosses, or even a bonus dungeon. Hopefully an actual dungeon, not something similar to the one they added to Twilight Princess HD or Link's Awakening. Let us know in the comments below, what would you add to Wind Waker HD to improve it for a new generation of consoles. Now it's time for some questions that you all left on the previous video. Remember to leave your questions on this video in the comments below to have them featured in a shoutout and have your question answered on our next episode. Samuel asks, you mentioned 𝗷𝗄𝗎 commenting on the possibility of a new 2D Zelda. What is the source for this? I haven't heard that, but would be thrilled to learn more. So around the time that Breath of the Wild first released, 𝗷𝗄𝗎 and Miyamoto were being interviewed by Game Informer, I believe, or maybe it was another YouTube video, where they were asked if they had plans for a 2D Zelda game, and 𝗷𝗄𝗎 said yes, they did. That he was excited for it, and he wants to evolve the way fans think of 2D Zelda. That was basically it. It was just 1 or 2 sentences, and the rest of the interview was kind of jokey. Of course, we know Nintendo is always working on various different games, accessories, consoles that never get released or really talked about. So honestly, within the time that interview took place, there could have been multiple Zelda games that began and ended production without us even knowing. They come up with a great idea that could be used in a Zelda game. They work on it for a couple of weeks to come up with a small presentation or demo or concept, and it gets shut down, never goes anywhere. So it could be nothing, or it could be something that has just been worked on by a very small team for the past 4 or 5 years. We know Nintendo does have seemingly a lot of different Zelda teams. They recently made Monolith Soft a new Zelda team. They have Grezzo, they have Tantalus. Grezzo usually being the one who does the 2D type Zelda games now. They have their home console Zelda team, and they have said that they still have their 2D Zelda team, but they could also be helping on Breath of the Wild 2 or have helped on other Zelda games. I believe there is another interview with Aonuma or Miyamoto, one of the two, where they again state that 2D Zelda games aren't gone, and they have ideas for more. So I'm very interested in that as well, especially the comment that he wants to evolve how we feel of 2D Zelda games, which makes me think of A Link Between Worlds, as it was a mix of 2D and 3D. When the camera would go behind the back or you would go on the wall, or cutscenes, the camera angle would lower and everything would be in 3D, but normally it would be the top-down 2.5D, which is also something kind of similar to what they had in the original concept for Twilight Princess's first dungeons, where the entire dungeons in Twilight Princess were originally 2D, but when facing an enemy, the camera would drop down and go into 3D. So when you say evolving 2D, that's what comes to my mind, though Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks were also 3D Zelda games, just with a 2.5D camera angle. But Nintendo, Miyamoto, Aonuma are a lot more innovative than I am, so I imagine they could come up with something a lot more clever than simply a mix of 2D and 3D, which is kind of just what they did with Super Mario Odyssey, taking the wall painting effect from A Link Between Worlds, and the new rumored Donkey Kong game, where it is rumored to go from 2D and 3D gameplay. But let me know what you think it could be. Ghostlink asks, do you think Nintendo feels the same way about the Zelda franchise as they used to? Paying attention on the recent years, it seems like Nintendo is slowly brushing the Zelda franchise off to the sidelines to try and replace it with newer IPs. It could definitely be seen how they completely ignored Zelda's 35th anniversary. What are your thoughts on this? So I actually have a video where I go in depth on how Nintendo actually didn't, or at least I don't think they forgot the Zelda 35th anniversary. They just didn't mention it because of the whole situation that was going on. But for the Zelda 35th anniversary that year, they actually did release and announce a lot of stuff. They just didn't do it all in a single direct. It was spread out across the entire year. There was 5 different first 4 figures Zelda statues given away and announced of the Breath of the Wild champions and a Hylian shield. Skyward Sword was announced. We had Zelda-themed hardware, we had Zelda-themed Joy-Cons, new Zelda amiibo, Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask 64 versions were brought to the Switch. We had the Black Milk, very, very expensive clothing line announced and released. They did a giveaway for like a $500 statue of the Loftwing from First 4 Figures with Link riding it. There were tons and tons of new Zelda merchandise, clothing, accessories, and everything announced and released. And just like Breath of the Wild 1, I do believe Breath of the Wild 2 was actually meant to release that year, but was delayed to release on the next Nintendo console. There was a lot of other stuff. You can watch this video here to learn more. There were several other things that was announced. We were contacted and even signed an NDA from Nintendo and Amazon to do a big Zelda 35th or whatever celebration that was live on Twitch. And there were mentions of having other Zelda games celebrated as well. It's just a lot of this wasn't announced directly by Nintendo on Twitter or something, and it wasn't announced in a big Nintendo Direct. So a lot of people didn't know about it or come by it or even realize it. There are still people who don't realize that there are really amazing first 4 figure statues of all of the champions. Mipha's about to release. They're doing a giveaway for it. First 4 figures is. Ravioli or Rivali has already released, and the other 2 are coming later, but they were all announced early last year, along with a general Hylian shield first 4 figure collectible. And that's also coming off of Majora's Mask's statue that released not long before that. We were also told certain Zelda content was going to be included in DLC for Animal Crossing, similar to the Mario DLC, but again, it's all there. Go watch the video. I think you'll enjoy it. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and now for the amazing Patreon supporters who, sadly, I don't make that much, especially lately, from YouTube. So it's because of all of you Patreon supporters. It really helps me take time to make all of these videos, which is why I've started doing these small Q&As at the end of videos as a sort of thank you to answer your questions and give you all shoutouts. So again, thank you. If you have any questions you would like for us to answer, or news and topics you would like us to discuss in a video or our podcast, you can leave them below in the comments, and we will get to as many as we can. And if you are a Patreon supporter, we will guarantee that your answer is moved to the top of the list to be answered or discussed first on our podcast, which happens every Thursday at 9:30 Eastern or 6:30 Pacific. Next Thursday, we may be having one of our friends who has a history of working on the Zelda series coming on our channel. Go ahead and put your guesses on who it may be in the comments below. So a huge thank you to 𝗏𝗏 someone whose name is only donated to hear Jesse speak my name and then didn't give me his name, Gene Pinna, Disappointment, Joseph Stewart, ZAIN JIWANI, SOBERX, Mr. Monocled Metroid, David Guthman, Zoe M, Natsu, Jesse Wood, 𝗏𝗏, Ashton, Justin Clark, Candy, Chad Costin, Largnar, Monica Spath, Lovable Christie, and Gus Calvo. I apologize if I got some of your names wrong. Please comment below, or you can message me directly to correct how I pronounced your name. Thank you all for your support, and I hope these videos keep entertaining everyone.